Good evening, good afternoon. We are waiting for some other friends that have registered. I ask you to wait for a minute before to start. We are going to start in 1 minute. Welcome to all. Thank you for joining us. We are still waiting for some friends who are joining us. We would like to thank for your participation. I want to comment that this is a webinar organized by the World Student Christian Federation, the World Communion of Reformed Churches, Kairos Palestine, among other friends, sisters, and brothers, in order to bring some insights, some context to discuss some theological perspectives and to challenge narratives about what is going on in Palestine. Before to start, I would like to invite Janet to pray for this webinar, to pray for Palestine.
Thus says the Lord, a voice is heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping. Rachel is weeping for her children. She refuses to be comforted for her children because they are no more. Let us pray. God of life, many mothers weep also today for their children murdered in Gaza and Palestine by a bullet or disdain, by hatred or a missile. God of joy, how can we sing to you in the midst of so much suffering of death? God of hope, how can we announce your good news surrounded by uncertainties, denials, fake news, apathy, indifference, silence? God of justice, how to transform the world into a just and peaceful world when genocide is committed and it is justified as a just revenge, as a self-defense. Kyrie eleison, Lord, have mercy. Our hearts are broken, but we trust in you, dear God of love and justice. We need to remember your truth. You, our Prince of Peace, came to us as a child to teach us that peace needs to be cared, grown, protected, loved. To teach us the gospel of humility, respect, healing, inclusion, liberation in times of hegemonic empires. Help us to find your answers in the voices of those who speak from the situations of conflicts, unveiling our eyes to see you in the most vulnerable ones, and do not play the game of the powers that generate and legitimate violence and oppression. We want to be your instruments of love and truth, mercy and respect. Sow in us your peace that surpasses all understanding. Amen.
Thank you, Janet, for this powerful prayer. Friends, today is almost the 60th day of the Israeli war against Palestine, and the temporary ceasefire ended, leaving Palestinian people in Gaza and also in the West Bank vulnerable in front of renewed attacks. This current situation, as we see today, is only a part of what is the historical situation in Palestine. That's why we want to emphasize in today's webinar not only about genocide and the terrible things that are going on in Palestine right now, but also to bring some insights from the history, from the theological insights, and we have for that the voices from Palestinian people who will speak today. As mentioned before, I want to make some bullet point about what are the main topics of this webinar. First of all, is to amplify the voices of the Palestinian, provide a platform for Palestinian voices to be heard, ensuring that narrative is presented from the perspective of those directly affected. Secondly, is to assess the impact and deshumanization of the ongoing narratives about the situation, understand that the current state of the Palestinian people and the subsequences of the ongoing situation, particularly examining the deshumanization that has occurred through the narrative developed by mass media and the lobby of Israel with Western countries. Palestinians have been reduced to mere numbers, highlighting the urgent need to address this dehumanizing aspect. Thirdly, reject excuse for apartheid or genocide. Emphasize that there are no justificable excuses for refraining from using the term apartheid in describing the historical situation in Palestine and the ongoing genocide in Gaza. Facilitate discussion that challenge any attempt to downplay the severity of the issues at hand. And finally, is to promote awareness and challenge double standard, explore and challenge the double standard that exists in addressing the situation in Palestine, discuss how institutional fear has prevented to use the term genocide, encourage a more open and honest discussion within the ecumenical movement to address the gravity of the situation, and encourage participants to carry forward the discussion and advocate for justice in the respective community. The agenda of today, we will listen from three Palestinian people, as mentioned. And the idea is firstly to explore the current situation and some historical facts. Secondly, to discuss perspective from theological perspectives, discuss the situation, and finally, to end discussing the narratives. I would like to introduce our first speaker, Jasmina Rishmawi. Jasmina was born and raised in Bethlehem. Jasmina is pursuing a degree in theology at QA Leuven in Belgium. Is an executive member of the World Student Christian Federation. She also holds an advanced master degree in cultural anthropology and development. Thanks, Jasmina, for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Marcelo. Thank you, Janet, also for the prayer. And thank you all who have been organizing this webinar. Thank you for inviting me to be part of it. I will be going through the current context of what's happening in Palestine right now. So if you are following the news closely, some of what I'll be saying will be already familiar to you. But this is for a general context to set the tone for the webinar. Well, of course, if you are in the West, if you live in the US or Canada or Europe, you are familiar with the term that has been overflowing in the news, that this is the Israel-Hamas war. But this is a very misleading framing the situation. What's happening right now is a war against all Palestinians, not only in Gaza, but what's happening in Gaza is also a genocide and ethnic cleansing. So today we mark the day number 60 since the genocide started in Gaza. And up until today, there are over 15,900 people who have been murdered by Israel in Gaza. And actually, the numbers haven't been properly updated for the past 2 weeks because hospitals hasn't been able to properly count the dead in Gaza. This number actually includes over 7,000 children, 77 journalists, and over 200 or almost 300 medical staff. More than 7,000, another 7,000 are buried under the rubble in Gaza, are still buried under the rubble. Over half of those are children, and more than 42,000 have been injured. And over 1.9 million people have been already displaced in Gaza. We are talking about 80% of the population. Let those numbers sink in. Like, think about those. Like, these are not numbers. These are not numbers. These are just people. These are normal people, just like all of us. And I'm so sick and tired of trying to humanize ourselves, for trying to prove that we are human too, that we actually deserve to live in dignity and justice and peace like everyone else. But somehow our lives are destroyed easily. We are perceived as disposable or dispensable, and even these numbers aren't shocking anymore for the West, I would say, because even a call for a permanent ceasefire seems to be very hard to reach at the moment. So for 60 days now, we have been watching an ongoing slaughter on every screen. We've been watching the genocide live on every TV. Over 60% of Gaza, of residence units in Gaza have been destroyed or damaged. And there were over 200, at least 200 attacks on hospitals and direct attacks on ambulances. Now there are 26 hospitals and 55 healthcare centers that are out of service in Gaza. People are starving with no access to food, clean water, fuel, electricity, even communication channels. People of Gaza are being slaughtered in front of our eyes. A genocide is going on, and we are watching. Even when the Israeli regime asked people of Gaza to move from the northern part of Gaza to the south, as if it was a safer part of Gaza, they were still targeting the south. They're still targeting the southern part of Gaza. They're still targeting all parts of Gaza. They targeted people even as they were fleeing from the north to the south. And now all we are hearing about the plans of the Israeli regime to push people through the borders to Egypt, to displace them again. And as we are as Palestinian people, we are familiar of these tactics, and this is exactly what happened in 1948 and 1967, which is another Nakba, another catastrophe. It's ethnic cleansing. But what's happening in Palestine is not only focused on Gaza. We have been seeing what has been happening in the West Bank even before 7th of October, and this year alone, over 200 Palestinians were murdered by Israel in the West Bank. And since the 7th of October, there were another 242 Palestinians up until yesterday. They were murdered in the West Bank by the Israeli soldiers or by Israeli settlers who have been attacking Palestinian villages, homes, even targeting cars in the streets. Even yesterday, a friend of mine was crossing a checkpoint between Bethlehem and Ramallah, and she had a soldier point a gun from point 0 to her head just because she didn't understand the instructions to hand over her ID. So what's happening right now is not another cycle of violence. It's not just an eruption of violence or a disruption of peace. What's happening right now it's an extension of what has been happening to Palestine for over 75 years. Gaza alone has been under a blockade for 17 years now. So Israel was, since 2006, stopping controlling all the crossings to Gaza from air, land, and sea. and also prohibiting contact between Gaza and the West Bank, at least. Movement in and out of Gaza for people and goods is virtually impossible. So, so again, what's happening in the West Bank is also not it's not separated from what's happening in Gaza. It's all a part of the colonialist regime, colonialist Israeli regime. So again, I want to add to what you mentioned, Marcelo. What's happening in Palestine is not only a system of apartheid that's being held by Israel. It's a colonialist. It's a colonialist regime that is built on our mass graves. The whole of Israel is built on our mass graves. So we are not talking again. We're not talking about two states fighting. That's how it's pictured in the news. It's framed in the news that they are two states fighting. Like this is an Israel-Hamas war, and these are like two equal entities that are fighting. But basically, Israel was built on our mass graves. These are not two states fighting over borders. This is this is a colonial system. This is settler colonial apartheid system that is looting our country, that is confiscating our lands, imprisoning our people, settling with over 500,000 settlers in the West Bank itself, which is illegal under international law, and also abducting Palestinians and imprisoning them for unlimited and without charge or trial for in administrative detention. So there are over 7,000 Palestinians in Israeli prisons right now. Aren't these hostages too? Why aren't we talking about these too? Why is the world only upset when white lives are affected? So basically, I'm honestly appalled by the silence of the word, and I'm appalled. I'm not surprised, but I'm appalled how violence has always been normalized in Palestine or in the Middle East in general, or against brown bodies in general. I actually remember like one of the first wars, the first war in Gaza in 2008, end of 2008, beginning 2009. There were over 1,400 Palestinians killed by Israel in a month. Why didn't the word speak up then for Palestinian lives? Why the word is only angry when white lives are affected? Why is it okay for us to die? And then again, we are talking now about over 15,000 Palestinians who have been murdered in 60 days, at least 15,000. So why are our lives disposable? Like I'm appalled by the word, and I'm honestly appalled by the Christian word, to be honest, because right now I'm just checking my notifications and I receive a call for prayer for peace. And for me personally, this is insulting actually. How can we be talking about peace in such a situation without talking about justice? And what kind of peace are we praying for as Christians? Is it peace with us being massacred in silence, with us being living under oppression, colonialism, and apartheid, and persecuted for speaking up, for fighting back? Is that the kind of peace that people are praying for? Or these are just calls for our obedience or our surrender or our silent death? So if you need to pray, please pray, but pray for justice, pray for freedom, pray for liberation, and pray for actions. Because right now, honestly, as Palestinians, we don't believe in the myth of human rights. It's a myth. International humanitarian law, international laws, for me at least, they are a myth, because they are only applied for certain people, for certain bodies, but not for everyone. So we do not feel that we are seen by the world, and especially as Palestinian Christians, we totally feel invisible. So right now, and again, I'm speaking for myself. We don't want only charity or only empathy or thoughts and prayers. We currently need actions, and prayers for peace are not enough. No, we need you to take the streets. We need you to mobilize. We need you to talk about what's happening in Palestine. We need you to talk to your representatives and to demand at least, like the least demand is a permanent ceasefire, the least of the demands. We need to actually to start to start using the right terminology. We cannot still be talking about a conflict in the current situation. It's not a conflict. It's ethnic cleansing. It's genocide. Israel is a settler colonial apartheid regime. And we need to stop talking about, we'll stop using the both sides narratives. These are not both sides. These are not equal sides. These are colonizers and colonized, oppressors and oppressed. These are occupiers and occupied. These are not equal. There is a huge power imbalance. We need the word, and especially the Christian word, to revisit their positions and affiliations, and especially their theologies that justify injustice and oppression and colonialism. And being silent means being complicit in the ongoing genocide and the ongoing colonialism of Palestine. And also solidarity only with our dead bodies. Solidarity only with our dead bodies without recognizing our own agency to speak up for ourselves and to fight for ourselves. It's also conditional solidarity, and that's not allyship. We need you to actually act and to stop funding companies that are complicit in our colonialism and genocide. If you are any company that is profiting of apartheid and colonialism and human rights violations, if you stand against that, then you should stop. You should stop funding it. We need to actively advocate together to decolonize Palestine, because what's happening right now is a reflection of what could happen around the world to anyone else without it being questioned and without it being justified. So this is not only about Palestine, what's happening right now, it's all connected, and no one is free until we are all free.
Thank you, Jasmina. Thank you for your speech, for your words. I think it's not easy for Palestinian to insist in you humanize yourself as you described. Thank you for some key words and key concepts you have bring that not only set the tone but also provide to the audience a broader sense of what is going on in Palestine. As you describe, this last 60 days is only a piece of a broader map of injustice, colonialism, and apartheid. I will remark in your speech the pray for justice, not only for peace. Pray for justice because this is beyond of the common word that people usually say, even in social network, on mass media, about peace. Also, you have highlighted the both side theory. You have challenged that part, and this is very important. It's not possible to work for justice without understanding inequalities, without understanding a system of colonialism where there are no two equal parts. And thirdly, I will say that your call for action for Christians is key. We will come back to this call for action at the end, but thank you very much for your insights. And right now we want to start with Reverend Munter, who will bring some theological perspective on the process, on the situation of Palestine. Let me introduce Reverend Munter. Reverend Munter is a Palestinian pastor and theologian leading the Evangelical Lutheran Christmas Church in Bethlehem. He's also academic dean of Bethlehem Bible College and is the director of the highly acclaimed and influential Christ at the Checkpoint Conference. He's the author of books and articles on theology. Thank you, Reverend Munter, for joining us today.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming, and thank you, Yasmin. You said almost everything I wanted to say, so now I have to think of new things. But thank you, Yasmin. I think it really sets the tone for this webinar. Let me begin by just describing the atmosphere. We are really right now broken. These are some of the most difficult times I've been in. The extension of this genocide is the hardest part right now for me. The fact that it's not stopping and no one seems serious to stop it. The fact that 300 or 400 people dying every day seems normal with the world. It's so hard to accept. It's so hard to accept. And as was already said, we feel that our lives don't matter. And I want to echo everything Yasmin said in terms of how we describe the reality. This is not a conflict. This is not a war. This is a vengeance campaign. Let's call it what it is. Vengeance campaign with no regard to human life. It is a genocide. And when you look at the actions of the state of Israel, just 2 days ago, the bombardment of one house after a residential building after the other, 4 or 5 of them next to each other in Khan Yunis, it's clear they want to create a whole community of homeless people so that they leave. This is a targeted, planned ethnic cleansing campaign. Why else would they create this huge mass of unemployed, homeless people? Why would they displace this big number of people? We need to really point to the facts. And let's also make something clear, because we keep talking about the silence of the world. I don't think that's accurate, because the world basically gave the green light for Israel to commit this genocide. In the first week, one leader after the other came and provided support, weapons, money, whatever it takes. And no one seems to regret or to say, oh, that was uncalled for. So it's the same Nakba. Some have said this is Nakba number 2. I think it's the same Nakba because we're still living the continuation of what happened in 1948. When Yasmin and others and myself use words like settler colonialism, we really want to highlight the fact that Israel started as a secular colonial entity. This is how the state of Israel was started, by European settlers who came from Europe. Israel was built as a state, and this is important. Israel as a state was built on the rubbles of on the ruins of the villages and towns of those Gaza people. They were displaced and ethnically cleansed from their homes. This is what happened in 1948. This is the definition of settler colonialism. You come and colonize someone else's land, but in the process, you displace, displace a whole total community to take their place, because you want to control the area. And it's still happening. It is still happening. This is the 1948 Nakba continuing. And when we point to the context, this is not only about the 16 years of the brutal siege. We need to make something very clear. It's hell on earth in Gaza right now. It was hell on earth before October 7th. So just imagine 16 years of a brutal siege followed by this. Before October 7th, I've always said and written that Gaza is a proof that the conscience of the world is dead. Before October 7th, I've been saying this. Because how are we okay with the concept of prisoning in a concentration camp 2.3 million people, controlling even the amount of calories that got into them? And this is before October 7th. So this is the context. And the apartheid and the whole historic Palestine reality of one state, 2 laws on the ground. What this genocide, what this war has revealed is how important the narrative power is and the battle over narrative is. I'm sick and death of people beginning the narrative in October 7th. October 7th was horrible, but things did not start then. And then to look at the reaction of the world, I'll come to this. How, one people dying, one group of people, it's a tragedy. The others, it's collateral damage. But it's been happening to us for a while now. the idea of self-defense. How is the killing of almost now 7,000 children self-defense? I mean, tell me, how do you justify, how do you accept that? And the fact that the idea of Israel's right to defend itself keeps repeating is beyond our comprehension. And the dual narrative, you know, beginning by condemning Hamas, Israel's right to defend itself, and then the prisoners, the whole thing about the prisoners exchange. You know, one side, they are prisoners, maybe terrorists, the others are hostages. Even if our own hostages, the Palestinians, are children and women who have not been without trial, without a lawyer, without a charge, 6 months after the other, including 14 years old and 15 years old kids, that's fine. But Hamas, a few individuals kidnap children, oh my goodness, it's barbaric. It's when a state does it, it's self-defense. When a group does it, it's terrorism. It's the same act, even worse, you know, and you know, they come in the middle of the night to kidnap these children and put them in jail without trial. But how, again, both sides are described is you know, how the whole, you know, how we were dehumanized as Palestinians and continue to be dehumanized. I look at how even church statements describe what happened. You know, they talk about one barbaric acts of Hamas and they condemn them because they're evil. And then they describe, meanwhile, Israel is killing children. You know, the way people talk about Palestinians, Hamas, and so on is so, the intention of it is to dehumanize all Palestinians. So to me, I'm convinced after this war that truly the world don't see us as equal, you know. 17,000 lives killed after October 7th, and I wonder, will we ever see the Palestinian flag on the Eiffel Tower, on the Berlin Wall? Will we ever see sympathy from the world over our children who are killed? And it's been hard, really hard to watch politicians rationalize the killing of our children. It's really hard. Biden even dismissed the numbers. Very racist approach. White House spokesman keeps saying, well, Israel is not really targeting civilians. Oh, really? You're kidding me. Israel is not targeting civilians. I'm convinced that they don't look at us as equals. And thank you, Yasmin, for mentioning the human rights issue. The hell with the human rights. I'm a pastor. I would have said a better word. Doesn't apply. You know, it's a fancy word they use to look righteous and to look superior. But when it's time to apply it, when they commit the genocide, the crimes, no one cares about the human rights. You know, and I'm convinced that at the core of it, it's racism. It's racism because they don't see us as equal. In my naivety, I thought if I take a message from church leaders to Washington, and I did that last week, I had meetings in the White House, in the State Department, in the Congress, that maybe they would listen from church leaders. And I left USA more convinced than I was before, although I always knew this, that America's white nationalism trumps any other allegiance, even if it means destroying a whole Christian community in the Middle East, in Palestine and Gaza. Their own allegiance, their own white nationalism is more important. And because part and parcel of that is alliance with Israel, that trumps anything else. They don't look at us as equals. This is the core of the issue, racism. Let's talk about churches. Let's talk about churches, church responses. If I said it's been so hard on us as Palestinians to watch how politicians continue to justify and rationalize the killing of our children, it's even harder to see churches doing the same. Churches echoing the same Zionist narrative. October 7th, self-defense, collateral damage. Hamas is holding Palestinians as human shields. It's the same. It's the same in churches. We've seen everything this war. We've really seen everything. From those who are Zionists, who've always provided Israel with the software to continue its settler colonialism, with Christian Zionists, even the moderate Christian Zionists who talked about the just war theory and why this is a just war. Of course, you know, Palestinians don't have the right to defend themselves. It's terrorism. Israel, that's just, they can defend themselves. We've seen one Christian Zionist leader after the other lean their support, give their support, let alone the money that came to the Israeli IDF, this war from churches. It's sickening to us that Christians are helping the entity that is committing genocide over our people, including Christians in Gaza. It's sickening for us. But we've also seen churches who are not only weaponizing the Bible, we've seen everything, as I said, this war. We've seen the silence. We've seen the silence of many churches. As I've been saying, this silence is complicity. When you're silent where a genocide is taking place next door or any other where in the world, we live in one world, you say nothing, you're complicit. And oftentimes that silence is covered in fake spirituality. Thank you again, Yasmin. Praying for peace, praying for end of war, and getting ready for the huge charity package that we are about to give. We're okay with the massacre. The massacre is taking place with silence. We're not going to see anything about it. When it's over, we'll bring our charity, we'll bring our relief efforts, and look, the good ones. We are the good ones who are helping. But we said nothing during the charity beyond praying for peace. At this time, praying for peace is not enough. At this time, if you're not willing to call things as they are, if you're not willing to point the fingers and say, this is a genocide, this is a vengeance, this is evil, we have to stop, you're complicit. We need prophetic, and there has been the prophetic church, and we're so grateful for the prophetic church and let me say, more than ever, it takes courage now to stand for justice. And it's not just for justice, for the dignity and humanity of the Palestinians. For the dignity and humanity of the Palestinians. And right now, it seems it takes courage more than ever to do so. So I want to thank everyone, maybe in this call, who have showed this, what we call in Kairos, the costly solidarity, because we need you more than ever. We've seen the power of the voices of the streets. We've seen the power of grassroots. Whereas politicians are not with us, the street is with us. Whereas church leaders are not with us, many in the pews are with us. I've been receiving mass support from people. And I think this compels us, especially in a movement like this, the Students' Federation and others, to redefine what the church is. The church is not a hierarchy, it's not a structure. The church is the people, the church is the movement on the ground. We need to rediscover the meaning of the church, mobilize that, so that we rediscover and bring the church back to its prophetic vision, what the church should be about. So I don't want to just focus on the negative side, because there's been so much support pouring from the streets, not just, of course, from churches, but all people of faith and non-faith who have been in the streets fighting for the humanity and dignity of Palestine. As I said, we need your persistence more than ever. We need to keep knocking on the doors of these politicians. Every day we lose without a ceasefire means 300 to 400 people killed, including maybe 100 children. This is tragic. This has to stop. And finally, I bring you one final message from Bethlehem, where I am speaking from. I'm the pastor of the Christmas Lutheran Church, and maybe you've heard Christmas celebrations are canceled this year. But as I said in our church 2 days ago, Christmas itself is not canceled, because Christmas is important, it's empowering. Christmas is the birth of Jesus among the occupied. It's God's solidarity with the oppressed, God's solidarity with those who are suffering from injustice. This is how I view Christmas. Jesus being born at the heart of a brutal empire among the colonized, when his family had to go from Nazareth to Bethlehem for such, because of a census that is meant to control and divide, whose families survived a massacre themselves. And interestingly, they had to escape to Egypt in the same way how today, Palestinians are considering Egypt as our refuge. History repeats itself, and the Christmas narrative has become our own comfort zone, because we see Jesus as identifying with us. And this is why in our church, when we thought, how do we celebrate Christmas this year, We came with the idea of Jesus under the rubble, the manger under the rubble. Maybe some of you have seen it. I see links to it. We created a manger under the rubble. As I said, if Jesus is to be born in our world today, I think he would be born under the rubble in Gaza, in solidarity with those children who are being pulled from under the rubble day after day after day, and Jesus comes and identifies with us. So this is our message to ourselves, a message of comfort, but it's also our message to the world. This is what Christmas looks like in Palestine, the land of Christmas. Children are being killed. Families are being displaced, their homes destroyed, but we're still celebrating life, Christmas from the midst of the rubble. Thank you, and I look forward to interacting with you after we hear from you.
Thank you very much, Munter, for your words. Your comments, your insight are very important. I would like to remark this idea of for how long it was denied and still continue being denied the right of self-defense and self-determination of the Palestinian people, and how concepts and words repeated with the bias of the mass media defines ideologies to justify genocide. Now the world is justifying the right of self-defense of Israel. Meanwhile, for a long time, and still now, the right of Palestinian people was not there. This concept, these bias ideologies justify the normalization of thousands of people, as you mentioned, as a collateral damage for the right of self-defense. Also to remark your call for the churches and the fake spirituality that both of you, Jasmina and yourself, have highlighted. Also, let's appreciate the message of hope. I think that we cannot be here talking together if we are not hopeful, if we have not hope in hope that become into action, of course. Thank you for that message. We will continue with our last speaker. I want to announce that we will have a Q&A session with another moderator. The organization of this webinar and the technical part allow us to have a Q&A box, and we would like that box could be used in the Q&A question, in the Q&A session. Let me introduce Muna, who is our next speaker. Well, Muna is a Palestinian Christian woman from Bethlehem who advocates for justice for the Palestinian people and has worked as a project coordinator for Kairos Palestine. In 2021, she obtained an MPhil in Intercultural Theology and Interreligious Study from Trinity College, Dublin. In December 2022, Muna joined the World Communion of Reformed Churches based in Hanover, Germany, as Executive Secretary for Mission and Advocacy. As a writer, she aims to articulate and represent the diversity of Palestine and Palestinians, highlighting their voice and agency. Thank you, Muna. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Marcelo. And thank you to Yasmin and Reverend Munter for their powerful contribution in this webinar. I think in light of what we have heard coming from Yasmin and Reverend Munter, I think it's important to talk about the narrative that has been going on for the past 60 days now. And I think it's important to highlight that in our ecumenical work, it's important to keep talking about Palestine more than ever, because more often than not, the idea of Palestine and working on Palestine is really welcomed. But when things on the ground happen in Palestine, complete silence and complete articulation of words happens. So I think now more than ever, we need to call things as they are. But in light of what's happening and what has been happening for the past 60 days, it's important to analyze how we talk about Palestine. I mean, how do we talk about Palestine has always been a question. but it's more relevant nowadays because the general consensus about Palestine and Palestinians is dwindling. And when there is a clear messaging that the Palestinian life seems to matter so little, how do we talk about Palestine? How do we voice our voices as Palestinians? And I think it's crucial to understand that while it's one thing for us Palestinians to always fight our way, fight for our voices to be heard, for our existence to be recognized, it's yet another to be given credibility. And more often than not, it feels like it's our responsibility to always educate and give our own narrative to people who are contemplating our narrative. And while it is our duty as Palestinians to our cause to speak up, there is always hesitance for people to fully adopt the Palestinian narrative and to be given credibility. We always have to support our argument by the work and the facts founded by internationally recognized organizations and NGOs so that we can appeal to people to believe us. But with the current genocide unfolding in front of our own eyes, the televised acts of aggressions and the ethnic cleansing conducted on the Palestinian people for the past 60 days, how do we talk about it? And how do we challenge the double standards narrative? As a Palestinian and growing up in Palestine, and seeing how my lived reality of occupation, of experiencing what it feels like to be oppressed because of your nationality, to realize on such a young age that life looks different for you because you are Palestinian, and to see how this reality is broadcasted and narrated by the Western world is something that the past 60 days has served to show in clear cuts and in consistency that we haven't seen before. On top of the pain that we have endured and have normalized as part of our everyday reality for decades, what is happening in Gaza has really shifted the whole narrative and took suffering and pain to a whole new level for us Palestinians. For the past 75 years, the level of suffering for Palestinians across Palestine has been distributed and has been contextualized so that your suffering and your pain is different depending on your geographical location in Palestine, in a continuous attempt to fragment the population. But it's also been consistent in its brutality and in the injustice of it. However, as all our eyes, hearts, and minds are looking at the dreadful and terrifying images and videos coming out of Gaza, one is really out of words to describe this new level of suffering unlocked on the Palestinians. On the one hand, the narrative and the media coverage serves to show the utter sense of indifference to the Palestinian lives and how lives are really weighed depending on your nationality or the color of your skin. But on the other hand, we see a clear message that only condemns the victim and the oppressed, but doesn't condemn the root cause of the problem and the occupation of the Palestinian people, and instead chooses to fund the occupation of the Palestinian people. For years, we've known that our humanity as Palestinians was conditional in the eyes of the world. When talking about the dehumanizing that the Palestinians have been living for decades, it has always been described through a very specific articulation of it by Western narrative. But what we are witnessing for 60 days now is a clear framing of the unworthiness of the Palestinian lives, that the right for self-defense is something that can be leashed on the Palestinian people only, and that is supported and that is financed by the whole world to see, with complete disregard to any human rights charters or any international law. And for the first time in modern history, all those charters that seemingly used to hold weight cannot hold any credibility or weight. And amidst the reality of mass destruction and death, the Palestinians are still reporting from the ground, are still communicating what's happening on the ground, are still appealing for the world that funds their deaths, that finds their death to be too complicated to stop. The continuous cycle of suffering has been beyond any human being's ability. Yet people in Gaza are still trying to survive and convey their suffering for the world in the hopes that it can be stopped, in the hopes that the world would be shocked to see all these babies and children murdered. It's as if we are auditioning for sympathy to prove that we deserve to live, while the world rejects and funds our death. What kind of a world do we live in that requires the oppressed to justify their humanity, to appeal for humanity, to ask for their death to count? And how does one victim up the ante on another? At what point can the Palestinians be given the right to resist all those injustices that have been unleashed on them for generations and generations? And while pundits on TV, meanwhile, talk of the thousands dead as justified collateral damage. But to this, we want to say that it's a complete obliteration of whole lives, of whole families, of histories, of whole cities. And in times like these, when the mainstream media reports the mass murder of people in Gaza, it's crucial to be reminded when we hear the numbers about Gaza that every single one of these people had lives. We need to be reminded that these are people with names and faces and lives and friends grieving them. We need to be reminded that these are cities, whole cities, real cities and towns, which have been turned into graveyards. The emotional and the psychological impact that these 60 days have had on all of us Palestinians, inside and outside of Palestine. But for all of us outside of Gaza, it's a sort of a privilege. It's only we're seeing it from our screen. So how do people in Gaza survive this? How will they ever survive this complete justification of their murder? By the whole world. But to us Palestinians as well, it serves as a reminder that you are not safe as long as you are Palestinian, wherever you are, and especially when you're in Palestine. Therefore, any kind of language that talks about Palestine without talking about the Palestinian experience of oppression and suffering is void from accuracy. So when Palestinians talk about their lived reality of oppression, we cannot use a language that basically takes away our agency and surrenders us to people who can only exist without talking about why we exist and how we exist. So to conclude, I think our responsibility as Palestinians is to keep talking about Palestine, to keep making our voices heard, because throughout the years, our message has been clear, a message of resilience and of challenging the double standards and counter-narrating the imperial narrative that has dehumanized us. An imperial narrative that aims to methodically, over the course of generations, to vanquish all hope among innocent people who have never known freedom. And while we continue to call for a ceasefire to this war on people in Gaza, our journey is a long, long one, because the status quo prior to these 60 days was never peaceful. And every day that Palestinians continue to live under occupation is unjustifiably inhumane reality that we all need to fight and end. Thank you.
Thank you, Muna. Thank you for your words. Thank you for bringing your insight about the narratives. I think that your speech today is create a lot of questions, not only for the audience, but for the churches and the ecumenical movement. I would say ethical and theological questions about the feelings people have when see thousands of dead as a number, and when they see an image from Israeli lobby in the mass media. What is the feeling of people when they see that? And I think that if this is a different feeling, we need to question our self-ethics and theological and our Christianity, I would say, since this is the perpetuation of racism under an imperialism regime that is not only in Palestine, but is a broader process that is worldwide. I think that this lack of empathy should be analyzed. It should be part of our analysis in the future. Friends, we will have 30 minutes more before this webinar ends, and we will have a session for questions and answers. I would like to introduce and call Serena Tiburtini, who is a member of WSEF, is a staff program coordinator for peace building and regional secretary of Europe. She will moderate the session, Q&A session. I will ask Serena if you are there.
Yes.
And I will remind, well, Serena will remind about the question and answer preparation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcelo, and thank you all for your powerful speeches and for the many questions that you're raising with your witness. Thank you to all participants who have already started asking questions in the Q&A box. We will collect the questions through the box in writing, and I will read the questions to the speakers. If the question is for a specific speaker, please feel free to write it and to mention it along with your question. If the question is an open question, I think if Muna, Reverend Munter, and Yasmina agree, we can do an open mic situation. And if you feel like you really want to answer, you can just open your mic and answer to the question. To enable wider participation, I would suggest that you keep your answers under 5 minutes. But of course, if there is something that you really want to elaborate on, I think we can allow for longer responses. So we already have a first question from an anonymous participant, and the question is to Reverend Munter. The question is, first, I would like to say that I'm in solidarity with the Palestinians who are living freely the rest of their lives in their respective land. I can feel the present Palestinian bitter experience and feelings because we indigenous people are also feeling like you. Like Israel, the current Burmese military regime in Myanmar intentionally committed ethnic cleansing to us. For our indigenous people, we lived freely in our land and never under the rule of Burmese people. Now, when we fight for our freedom, sovereignty, and self-determination by armed struggles, we are regarded as terrorists, almost 70 years now. But now we're being slaves in our native land. I have one question. As a Christian, how do you accept non-violence, the non-violent way? Is the only way for our freedom and liberation? How do you see the violence way as armed resistance or self-defense? What would you say to the oppressors? Thank you for asking this question, and Reverend Munter, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. It's a difficult question, to be honest, especially now, because with what's happening, all of our talk on nonviolence looks maybe silly. And it's a question that we're wrestling with, even as Palestinians and as Palestinian Christians, of course. Here's what I would say. I think, and I'm convinced that the nonviolent way, we call it in Kairos Palestine the creative resistance way, is actually the Jesus way. We have to think of it as this way. This is what Jesus taught us. You shall not overcome evil with evil, but with good. We've seen the result of wars. They're catastrophic. Wars will only bring destructions. Wars will only bring cycles of revenge that are never ending. And usually in wars, all logic and common sense is gone, or humanity is, people forget about human rights, or none of that. And the sad reality about wars is that children and women pay the price, always seem to pay the price. Children and the vulnerable and the elderly are the ones who pay the price. So I think we're compelled to find another way. And I think we're compelled to find ways that not just engage the humanity of our oppressors, because at the end of the day, the long-term consequences of this current genocide is brutal, because we still live in the land. We're not going anywhere. So how is it going? How are they going to reconcile the idea of two people living together in the same land? We either engage in a non-ending cycle of violence, or we find paths forward. But I agree. Right now, all of this seems empty. Right now, we're just in a survival battle. We want to survive. And I will not quick to condemn someone who will use armed resistance to defend themselves from literally being massacred and going through a genocide. But, we've always chosen the path of creative nonviolent resistance because we believe it is the Jesus way. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Reverend Munther. We have another question from Leila, and it's an open question, so feel free to respond if you wish. What is your view on the role of the Arab world for political support and acts of solidarity for the Palestinians? How hopeful are the Palestinians? And perhaps we can link it to the next question from Leila as well. Oh no, we can wait for that. I don't know, Muna, Munter, Yasmina.
Sure, I'll be happy to talk about hope. I think also I need to talk about how hope has been something of a commodity for not a commodity for the Palestinian people, but has been taken away from the Palestinian people, exported from the Palestinian people. Like often when we talk about our realities and our situations, people from outside our context would tell us, wow, we really take hope from you. We really learn how to have hope in our lives. And it's this subtle privilege that is first projected, but then it's also something that is put, the weight of hope is put on the Palestinian people to serve as a reminder for the rest of the world that they should be hopeful. And while we don't live in a hopeful situation, and while hope is dying in seeing the reality for the past 60 days and before that, but I think it just puts the whole definition of what really hope is and how the weight of hope is too grand, it's too big to carry on the Palestinian people with all the circumstances that we live by. I think for me, personally, it's the sense of hopelessness that really drives me and keeps me going, that this is not normal, that this is not how it should be, that this is why we're working, because, I mean, nothing is hopeful in this state of the world. I mean, and if we're not really seeing these dark times as a reminder that we should do better, I don't think there is hope for any of us all over the world. So this is my dark take on hope.
Thank you, Muna, also for reminding us that it's not up to the Palestinians to be an inspirational people for the rest of the world, because they have to hope and that we have to hope for them, but it's continuous work that we need to do something to make the current situation change instead of looking at the Palestinians in search for hope that we are looking for. Any of you would like to comment on your view on the role of the Arab world for political support and solidarity?
A quick point, I think, about the Arab world, maybe not directly related to the question. I think what happened in Gaza, or what's happening, actually confirms that you cannot achieve peace by striking a peace deal with Arab rulers and ignoring the core issue and ignoring the Palestinians. The second thing I would say is there is a huge gap right now in the Arab world between the people and the rulers themselves. And it's a big dysfunctionality, you know. The people are 100% with us, but the rulers follow their own interest. And you know, there are these regional games, battles that everyone is engaged in. I am also, you know, it's hard to say, but I want to appreciate the fact that Jordan and Egypt made it clear that they will not accept another refugee crisis. I think this is important. However, my fear is that it would lead to catastrophic results if people remain and are massacred. So it's a dilemma that it's hard to capture.
Thank you very much. Yasmin, I don't know if you would like to comment on this, or should I go to the next question?
I think that it covered this, said what I was wanted to say, honestly, so maybe we can move to the next.
Thank you. Our next question is also from Leila. How do we make our ecumenical statements and stand to focus on a free Palestine?
I can start with that, if that's okay. I think, well, I think first of all, we should stop shying away from having difficult conversations, and we should be brave enough to challenge ourselves and challenge our own positions. And it's important for ecumenical bodies to have a prophetic voice right now. We need it right now. It's literally a matter of life and death. It's not we don't need any shy statements, or again any calls for empty peace, or any charity. We don't need charity right now. We need actions now at this moment, because the genocide is still ongoing. The bombs are dropping on Gaza as we are speaking right now. They didn't stop. So basically, we actually need to act right now. And we need to start the conversation within ecumenical movements that we need to act. We cannot just stay praying from afar. Again, we need to call things with their actual names. We cannot just pay lip service and just talk about justice without acting for it. Ecumenical movements and ecumenical bodies need to put pressure on governments, on their representatives, need to take the streets, need to mobilize, need to organize. Like, the time of action is now, and we cannot wait anymore.
Thank you.
I would say that the ecumenical movement is actually in a crisis right now. To answer your question, how do we make our ecumenical statements? We don't want statements. Khalas. We think we can serve the world with statements. Actually, in our different messages right now to the world, we're asking for trips. We asked church leaders. Actually, my friends who went to the Pope, asked him to come to Gaza right now. Fly, come to Gaza. We've, our South African friends send the WCC a letter, organize a group and come to Gaza. Of course, no one wants to do this. Prayer for peace looks nice, you know. We're the spiritual people who pray for peace. Statements, you know, the problem with statements right now is that you want to please both sides. You write the statements with the image that there is an Israeli and a Palestinian sitting, and you want to make sure they're both pleased. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. This is not how church works. So this is why I think the ecumenical bodies right now is in a deep, deep crisis.
Thank you, both of you, for reminding us that our faith and our Christianity is not just about words and saying the right words that those we are speaking to want to listen to, but it's about saying the right words in the sense that they are true and speak to the truth and say what is right. We have a question from Jay. Due to the destruction created by Israel's ravaging onslaught on Palestine, will mean that there will be no place for survivors to which they can return. Where will they go, even if we stop this carnage right now? So if I understood the question is, what is happening is complete destruction of places and towns, which means that even if the war stops now, people will go back to places that are completely destroyed.
I think this is one of many, many other unanswered questions right now. This is the tragedy of what's happening in Gaza. There is no plan other than this vengeance campaign. The stated plan is to destroy Hamas. No one actually knows what that means. That is the very important question. Where are they going to go? I think Israel is hoping, banking on the idea that many would choose to leave. I think it's a well-executed plan, especially since this is not about a temporary solution where they can stay in an apartment. There's literally nowhere for them to live in. So what does the future hold? Who's going to be in control of Gaza after this destruction? Who's going to rebuild it? No one knows, and this is the madness we live in. This is the madness we live in, and no one seems to be talking about these issues at all. This is why I kept saying we don't look like equal. And I don't think anybody in their right mind has an answer to that question. To be honest, I don't think anybody has an answer to that question. And that's the tragedy.
Are there any other comments on this? I guess no. Muna?
I mean, no, I just wanted to say that it's also has been a clear method of derailing the whole process for the Palestinians on what to do next and how to go on life after this. I mean, the complete destruction of any life-supporting infrastructure in Gaza is just gone now. And to start with, Gaza wasn't livable, I mean, before this 60 days of war. I mean, the water situation, it's just the overly populated space. I mean, it wasn't livable, and now it's definitely not livable. And the whole question of what to do next, it's like, I feel like they made us like just ask for the bare minimum, just give us a ceasefire now. And okay, ceasefire hopefully, inshallah, happens soon. But I mean, what happens to all the people who left their houses? Their houses are bombed, the infrastructure, no schools, like all life has really stopped and are obliterated. So I think unless like drastic measures are being taken to challenge the status quo, to challenge what the reality in Gaza looked like for the past 17 years, I don't think it's going to look any better.
Thank you very much, Muna, for highlighting the fact that there will be much to do to improve the situation. And of course, the situation was already extremely difficult for the people in Gaza, and we don't know what the future holds.
Can I add something, Serena?
Sure, go ahead, Yasmin.
Well, I don't think it's about improving the situation. Well, for all of us, it's for me, it's frustrating to just just improving situation in a concentration camp. It's still a concentration camp. So what actually, it's very hard to imagine what would happen after the ceasefire. But the thing is, what we need right now is to start talking about decolonization of the whole area between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, because there would be no solution for Gaza as long as the situation is what it is. there will be no solution at all for Palestine unless we decolonize the whole land. So other than that, we will still be going through. Gaza will go through another genocide. The West Bank will go through whatever ethnic cleansing again. We cannot tell what will happen in the future because this will be ongoing. Because the plan of Israel is a war against all Palestinians, against our own existence in our own land, and this will be repeated over and over again. The Nakba never stopped. The Nakba is continued since 1948 and until today. It's still ongoing. So there will be nothing to go back to unless we actually start working on decolonization.
Thank you, Yasmin, for making it even more clear that, of course, going back to where things were is not an option, and we need to reconsider and rethink the entire situation if we want, as you have repeatedly said today, to improve the lives of Palestinians and respect them as human beings. There is a question, again, an open-ended question to all of you from Leila again. Many countries today are living under fascist regimes, and how are churches addressing this in relation to what is happening in Palestine? I assume there is a correlation between fascist regimes and imperialist regimes and occupation, but perhaps, Leila, if you don't mind, and if you're listening, clarifying your question, we can go on so that if you clarify your question a little bit, you can receive a better answer. Yarilin is asking, what role can current seminarians have in making noise and taking direct action to bring attention to the ethnic cleansing and genocide of Palestinians, especially in settings where their own seminaries have banned and or silenced speech regarding the liberation of Palestine?
I think seminaries should play a very, and can play a very, very important role now and in the future. Seminaries are important. The problem with seminaries is that it takes so much to change things and perspectives because, you know, it takes time to change curriculums, cultures within a seminary and so on. But I'm grateful for this question. You know, we need to challenge structures of coloniality within the seminary, within the academy. We need to challenge the domination of, for example, Western white theologies in textbooks. I think they should encourage more voices from areas of post and colonization and post-colonization. There's so much to do, but change will not happen in seminaries unless, you know, yes, students demand for it and churches demand for it. And I think part of the strategy moving forward is how do we reform our own seminaries. So thank you for just pointing to that. And I think one way is more global South, more voices from places of post-coloniality and coloniality, like in Palestine, as opposed to the domination of theologies of the North.
Thank you for this comment. We have an elaborate question from Clarissa. Unless there are other comments, I see. No, okay. I am heartbroken, as I'm sure all of us are, and we see the images of suffering, death, and destruction in Gaza and the ongoing raids, arrests, and destruction of homes in the West Bank. We need to redefine who the world is There are the world's leaders who are complicit in Israel's crimes of genocide. There is the mainstream press who claim to be neutral, but in fact are not. But the world is also the people across the world who are enraged by what is happening. This movement of protest and solidarity in all regions of the world must not be absent from our dialogue and discussions. I feel that there is a potential for a global movement of solidarity with Palestine, and I hope the BDS campaign will become part of this movement. Number 2, for Muna, I imagine it is difficult as a Palestinian to be based in Germany when there is only silence and where everything, for example, calling for a ceasefire, certain slogans like from the river to the sea labeled as anti-Semitism. What is happening in Germany, and do you feel supported?
I will say that as a Palestinian, I don't feel supported wherever I go. So any act of speaking up as a Palestinian and challenging the narrative in the West has always been challenging and has always been a sort of fighting the mainstream narrative that dehumanizes us and dehumanizes our resistance. So I don't think where I'm based geographically really determines how I feel supported as a Palestinian or not. It's a question wherever you are, whether you're in Palestine or outside of Palestine, that you're really not supported, but on the contrary, the whole narrative is founded and funded to stop the Palestinians on existing, really. So this is my answer to the question.
Thank you. I'm a bit conscious of time, but we have one last question. It's for Reverend Munter again. It's a follow-up to the previous question about non-violence. I'm going to summarize it. Do you really believe Jesus' way as a non-violent way is the only way for peace building and harmonious society? How do we understand Jesus' way in the Old Testament if we believe Father, Son, Holy Spirit as trine God in the whole Bible?
Yeah, so going back to that question about the nonviolent, I think it depends on, I mean, sometimes people confuse nonviolence with pacifism. When we call for nonviolence, we're not calling for no action and neutrality. We're calling for actions, advocacy, resistance even that is nonviolent. In Kairos Palestine, we clearly talk about resisting the evil of the occupation. We give examples like campaigns, boycotting, sanctions. And I think that the world has failed us in our ask as Palestinians to adopt the BDS movement, for example, and other important nonviolent means that we tried to execute. And yes, I think that Jesus points us to even love the enemy. Very hard to do. But I think loving the enemy means showing their ways, challenging them, calling them out, resisting them if they are doing wrong, without allowing their evil to dehumanize us as well and allow us to act in an unacceptable way and commit crimes ourselves. So again, I know it's a difficult path. I know that for many it doesn't make sense, but to me it's better than the current carnage we find ourselves in which, you know, the powerful do whatever they want without being held accountable, and it's more and more of that will lead to more children dying. We need to find other ways as humanity. We can't challenge the way of the empire with another way of the empire.
Thank you very much for this last comment, and thank you to all the participants for asking such such good questions that enable us to have a very dynamic discussion. I apologize to those who have asked more questions, but I am conscious of time and we need to close this webinar. So I would like to thank you, all of you again, the participants and the speakers for this Q&A session. And Marcelo, the floor is yours for the wrap up of the webinar.
Thank you very much, Serena, for the moderation. Thank you all the panelists and all the participants to be here. I think as a final remark that the World Student Christian Federation, the World Communion of Reformed Churches, Kairos Palestine, wanted that this webinar is not only testimonial. We want to promote actions, and we will look forward also from you. We want to hear from you on how we can improve our actions. For that, I want to just to remark that there are some processes where our organizations are involved. I would like to highlight that the World Student Christian Federation is adhering to the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. I would also like, I don't know if Camila can share the slide.
Yes.
And the BDS is a Palestinian-led movement for freedom, justice, and equality, and it's a non-violent resistant way of not resisting. Also to remark that you can follow and read everything related to Kairos Palestine document. There are a petition that we will send to you through email, and there are some documentation related to the World Communion of Reformed Churches, the document of the handbook, Focus Palestine, the WSCF Solidarity and Advocacy policy paper that implement a roadmap of actions. And also you can see here some website as the Palestine BDS. We continue working together to challenge not only society in general, but mainly our churches and the ecumenical movement. I think that we have clearly seen during this webinar that it's important to reframe our way we mention things, to use the correct words, to avoid double standard, and to challenge apathy or both side theories about the current genocide and this apartheid of more than 75 years. We continue together, working together, and we hope that our three organizations could work to continue doing this kind of webinar, but not only that, to promoting a campaign together to do actions worldwide.